You're listening to Feathers, a podcast of stories of women walking in faith. I hope these stories inspire you and encourage you to take flight in your own faith. I'm your host, Amy Bennett, and this is Season 7, Episode 4. Feathers is an outreach of Abiding Ministries. Find more encouragement at abidingministries.net. Well, hey friend, and welcome to Feathers today. I am always so glad to have you here with me. Today we have Jeanette Hanscome. Jeanette is an author and speaker and mom of 2 boys in the San Francisco area. Her work has been featured in places like Focus on the Family and Lifeway. Jeanette found herself as a single mom several years back after being married for over 20 years. And it's a season that really threw her out of her comfort zone, but where she found God's comfort and provision. And I just know there are so many people out there that are single moms and really need encouragement. I know it's such a difficult season to be in. So I really hope this conversation encourages you if you're in that season. But also we talk a lot about how the church can support single moms. So I'm excited for us all to hear Jeanette's story today. So let's go ahead and get started with my conversation with Jeanette. Hey Jeanette, and welcome to Feathers today.
Hi. Thanks for having me on, Amy. This is going to be really fun.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you here. Let's start out. You can introduce yourself, your family, and what keeps you busy these days.
Okay. Well, I am an author of 5 books, and I am a speaker and a blogger, and I'm a mom of 2 sons. My oldest is almost 27. He's going to be 27 at the end of this month, and my youngest is 15, and there are none in between, just this almost 12-year age gap that just we didn't really plan it that way, but that's the way things happen.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm doing the teen years again right now, which is a lot of fun.
Okay, so my kids are getting ready, it's birthday season, so my kids are getting ready to be 12, 13, and 15. So
oh my gosh.
I have 3 of them. So what is one piece of advice you would give me going into all these teen years?
I think it's just to, I've learned to choose our battles and let the kids be who they are.
Mm.
My sons are so different when it comes to their personalities. My oldest was really quiet and just really easygoing, and my younger one, Nathan, he just says what he feels. I never have to wonder what he's thinking, which in some ways is really good. He tells on himself. He doesn't hide anything.
Yep.
But I found that when I just let my kids be who they are, and instead of trying to mold them into my idea of what I thought they were going to be like when they popped into the world, it's a lot easier. And then also, and I think that goes along with choosing our battles. That like a fight. I don't want to fight over things like hair, and we'll save it for the big stuff.
Right. Well, it's so interesting you talk about that, because they really, my kids at least, are coming into this space where they're really getting their own personality. Mm-hmm. And it really is very different even from not even when they were just born, but like obviously when they were just, maybe in primary elementary school, their personalities are really changing, who, depending on their friends and, experiences they've had. And so it's interesting seeing them blossom kind of into their own personality.
Yeah, it is fun. It's fun to watch when we allow them to be who God created them to be.
Yes.
But then also knowing, it doesn't mean just because, my son enjoys saying whatever comes into his head, that I allow him to be disrespectful, or, I have to, have balance there.
Yeah, I have one that is exactly like that. You do not have to wonder what she is thinking. And and I'll use an example even in our home is at dinner. I mean, she's dramatic. She's a theater girl. She's always been that way. And things are black and white for her. They're either, she's having the best day ever or she's having her worst life ever. And so when she doesn't like dinner, it's the worst food she's ever eaten, right?
Yeah, she's gagging.
Yes, like, oh, I cannot eat this. This is so terrible. And, I'm like, okay, Lexi, it's okay to have an opinion about dinner, and it's okay to tell me that you don't like dinner. But what if you just said, this is not my favorite meal ever,
Yeah, I know. We had to do that when Nathan was little. I didn't want to hear say he hated something. I hate this. I hate this.
Mm-hmm.
So I told him to say, I'm not fond of this.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And then he caught me saying hate once when I was on the phone with a friend. But it was like, oh my gosh, I hate it when that happens. He called me on it immediately. He goes, Ma, don't say hate. You say not fond of.
Right. I mean, and it's true because they use that for people then, right? They're like, I hate her. And I'm like, you don't hate her. You're just mad at her right now or something, you know?
Yeah, it's a lazy word. And I use it all the time, too. It's just kind of our fallback. I hate that.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So I'm taking that into consideration. Pick my battles and let them be their own personality. I've got it. All right. I want to talk about your 5 books because you were, we're going to talk about your newest book, Suddenly Single Mom, today. But talk to me about your other 4 books. Those are fiction, right?
The first 2 were fiction. They were for teen girls. I wrote them through Focus on the Family as part of their Brio Girls series.
Oh, yeah.
And I was sure that was my audience. I was going to write fiction for teen girls, and then occasionally devotionals. I wrote a devotional for the Brio devotional series, Want More. It was called Want More Joy. And I had so much fun writing for that audience. And then I just found that nothing was really the young adult market kind of just sort of floundered for a while. And so I knew I would have to start thinking about maybe writing for women, and I had some ideas for devotionals. And then I had an opportunity to write Running with Roselle, which is a book I co-authored with Michael Hinkson, who's a blind man who survived 9/11. And that book is technically considered middle grade, but it kind of goes into young adult because it's one of those stories that all ages seem to enjoy, including adults. A lot of teachers and parents enjoy reading it with their kids. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Michael Hinkson's story.
Yep. Well, I did actually, as I was looking at your information, I did run into that, and I almost couldn't handle it. It was so emotional. So tell people, if they're not familiar, a little bit about the story.
Okay, Michael Hinkson was in Tower 1 of the World Trade Center on September 11th, and he's been blind since soon after birth. And he escaped the World Trade Center with his guide dog, Roselle, by walking down 78 flights of stairs.
Oh, that kills me, thinking about the two of them, 78 flights together. Oh, my goodness, I can't take it.
His story is amazing because they actually helped other people escape as well. And part of it was because they were so clear-minded, they were so in tune with each other and calm, that they helped other people stay calm. And Mike knew, I think Mike's blindness actually was a benefit to him on that day because there were a lot of things he didn't see.
Right. Yes, I can imagine.
So he just sort of went with, just need to get out of the building. And he knew that if the electricity went out, he would be in an advantage because he's used to navigating in the dark. So he told everybody, if the lights go out, I'll lead you out. We'll lead you out. And that kind of kept people calmer. But he and Roselle had to literally run for their lives when the towers started to fall. They were 100 feet away from the towers as they fell. And so that's where the title Running with Roselle came. But what we did is, because there's actually another book about Mike and Roselle, it's called Thunderdog. And that was for, the general adult audience. But Running with Roselle was for kids. And so we wanted to follow Mike's experience of growing up blind and also show what it was like for a guide dog to be trained. So we told the story from the perspective of Mike as he's growing up and Roselle as she's being trained to be a guide dog, and then bring them together. And then the 9/11 experience is like the ultimate test of their partnership as a guide dog and handler.
Oh my goodness, I can hardly take it just listening.
Yeah, it was a really exciting book to write. And
so you worked with him to write the book?
Yes, I co-authored it. He fed me the stories and I wrote them. So
oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was really neat to get to know somebody who is completely blind, because I've been visually impaired since I was born. So seeing the difference between having some vision and not having any, and and he grew up he's about, I think, 15 years older than I am, maybe. So he grew up going to school probably about a decade and a half before I started school. So, and I was the first visually impaired student in every school I attended. And so he was even more unusual because he was a completely blind student in a time when blind kids almost always went to schools for the blind. In fact, his mom was told to send him to an institution. And she refused. And my parents were told a lot of negative things too. So just being able to compare our stories and say, yep, I understand that. Yep, my parents were told that too. It was really, it was good. It was a really good experience.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So that is a fantastic read for somebody. I don't know if I can take it emotionally. If I can't hardly hear the summary. There's something about when animals, like movies or books, when animals are in danger. Like oh my goodness, especially horses, that they like do me in. I can't.
I know it is, but I think you'd enjoy seeing the way they worked together. It taught me a lot about how. Because Roselle was kind of presented in the media as a hero guide dog, and she received the Hero Guide Dog Awards. But Mike will say that she didn't save his life, that
really?
They worked together, that it's a team, that they worked as a team, and so he goes around and speaks about teamwork.
Oh, so good. That's so good. So what was your fourth book?
That was my fourth book.
Oh, okay.
The first two were the Brio Girls fiction, and then there was the Want More Joy devotional.
Oh, the devotional was third.
Yeah,
okay.
and then
Gotcha.
the fourth one was Running with Roselle, and then Suddenly Single Mom was my most recent, and that was my first book for adults, my first book for women. And that
goodness.
Was where I completely switched. I completely switched audiences. Really, in some ways, had to start my writing career over again because I was writing for adults and nonfiction and writing from my own experience. In some ways, it felt like my first book because it was the first book I wrote completely from my own experience. I wasn't writing it on like I worked for hire as a part of somebody else's vision or somebody else's story. It was completely flowing from my own experience, and so in so many ways, it felt like my first book.
Wow, that's so interesting. You have so much experience from many different angles. We could go on and on, just talk about the craft of writing, but I do want to jump into your actual story though, because I think you have a lot of good experience to share, and I'm glad that you switched over and have begun to speak to women, because I think you have a lot of hope and encouragement to offer women. So as we've mentioned, your title of your book is called Suddenly Single Mom. And I'd love for you just to take a few minutes. I think that title is just so capturing because it says Suddenly Single Mom, right? So and initially the person reading it, well, I wonder what happened. Why was it suddenly? So go take us back a little bit and tell us how this came about.
Okay, well, my husband and I were married for 22 and a half years when he was actually... Originally, he was asked to move out of our house because I had made some discoveries over the last, about a year before, that just showed there were a lot of issues going on that I didn't even know about. And we really I tried everything. He had so many opportunities to have accountability and help, and eventually the behavior just kept repeating itself. So, I talked to, our church got involved, and one of the pastors finally said, it's time for him to move out for a while and kind of have a wake-up call. And the goal was that we would work on restoring our marriage, that he would get counseling, and we would eventually have couples counseling once it became clear that he really was committed to our marriage. And so he was gone for 2 months, and then I started noticing that I thought, something's going on. Something is off. I don't think he is really wanting to stay married. I mean, I was kind of in some ways I saw it coming, but at the same time I didn't. But I went on vacation with my family to celebrate my mom's birthday, and he sent me an email saying that he was moving to a town 4 hours away. He had accepted a new job there, and he was pursuing a divorce. He no longer wanted to be married. And so all of a sudden I was like, wow, this is permanent now. What I thought was going to be temporary so that we could restore our marriage was going to be permanent. And that I was going to be a single mom. And because I'm visually impaired, I can't drive. I've been a freelancer doing editing and writing for several years, and that's what I was doing at the time. And I had to, I got hit with the reality that I can't support myself on just my income. And how am I going to get where I need to go and get the kids where they need to be? And this is real, and that I was going to be divorced, and I'm becoming a statistic.
Mm-hmm.
And
especially after 22 and a half years. That's what's kind of hard to swallow, right?
Yes. It was like, what was all of this about? And my husband had a lot of health problems. He'd had a heart attack when he was 38, and that had really, rocked our world in many ways. The fact that he survived it was such a miracle, because usually young heart attack survivors, usually young guys who have heart attacks don't survive because they delay going to the hospital, because they don't think they're having a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of catapulted us into a season of medical problems and a lot of time out of work, and he had some other surgeries related to other things. And so I really felt like I had expected all of that to bring us closer, and for a while it had. And so the fact that instead he abandoned the family, it was that just compounded the blow. That 22 and a half years of marriage, all of these health problems, and you're leaving. And so it was just a betrayal on so many levels. But at the time, I think I couldn't afford to dwell too much on that. I had to just throw myself into survival mode and do what I had to do. And thankfully, we had a really supportive church. And in many ways, I feel like Suddenly Single Mom is a testament to a very supportive church family, and a wonderful example of how to support somebody who's in a crisis, how to support a single mom. Because I know of people who had such different experiences. They said they didn't get any support from their church, that they lost all their Christian friends. And so I was afraid that would happen to me.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I think it's quite surprising that that's the one thing you pick out, because, divorce has been quite scandalous, really, within Christian culture and church, and I don't think, in a lot of times, churches know what to do in those situations. Can you describe, practically, because I'm wondering, as a church member, what does that look like? How does the church best support newly single moms and newly divorcees?
I think it's just by letting them know that you still love them, and that because there's so much, it's just sort of kind of a sense of embarrassment and shame anyway, attached to being abandoned by your spouse, or being divorced for any reason, whatever caused a divorce, it's embarrassing. It's like, I couldn't make my marriage work for whatever reason. I couldn't make it work, even as people were saying it wasn't your fault, he was the one who chose us, but it was still, there's this but my marriage is over, and we're experiencing so much loss and so much confusion and sadness and losing so many other things in the process, that I think that if the best thing I think that a church can do is have compassion on a woman or even a man who is going through a divorce, because they are experiencing so much loss and so much pain, and so often there are issues involved that nobody knows about, that we don't share, that
and you can't share.
Yeah,
a lot of times, because what I've experienced with friends in divorce, you can't write anything down, you can't talk about it, because then it's used against the people
right.
legally.
Mm-hmm. I had to be very careful who I shared details with, because, like you said, because it could, legally, I had to be so careful about what I put out there. I had to completely step away from blogging, and I had to be really careful what I wrote about. I mean, not that I was ready to write about what I was experiencing at the time, but I went to a very small compared to the church I go to now, a very close-knit church. And so it was kind of like living in a small town where everybody knows everyone. So I had to be very selective about who I shared certain details with. There were close friends who knew everything, and then there were those who, months after my husband left, didn't even know he was gone, because he had a really unusual work schedule. So it was very common for him to not show up at church. Mm-hmm. So for some people, like 6 months later, where is he? Like, oh, he moved out. He left us. And so I had to tell the story over and over and over again. So I think that's another way I think that churches can be compassionate, is giving, not pressing people for details. Letting them just embracing them and letting them share, giving them the freedom to share whatever they feel like sharing or not sharing, and just knowing that whatever is going on in their life is something that they need compassion for, and they need a lot of love, and also helping them, because like I said, I was living on a freelancer's income. I had no idea if my husband was going to send money, and there were actually months when he didn't send us anything, and so I survived because my church family didn't say, call if you need anything. Tell us what you need. Because the thing is, we don't know what we need.
Right.
And we don't want to be a charity case. So we're going to do as much as we can on our own. But instead of saying, call if you need anything, they just immediately said, here's what we're going to do. And they said, these are the bills we're going to pay. Don't worry about these bills.
Oh, wow.
We'll pay these.
That's incredible.
And you just worry about this over here. And somebody offered to take me to see an attorney because even though I wasn't really ready to hire an attorney yet, still I needed to go and see what my options were and see what I was up against. Like, okay, what do I do when my husband leaves town and says he's going to file for divorce, but he never filed. He didn't file, and so it was just such a scary time. But every step of the way, I had somebody willing to, like, I want to take you to your attorney appointment. I didn't even have to call around asking for a ride. This person who'd been through a divorce herself said, I really want to take you to that appointment. And women in my Bible study who passed a sheet of paper around and wrote their names and phone numbers down so that if I ever needed a ride anywhere, or if I just needed to talk, or if I just needed anything, that I could call them. And so I could never say, I don't have any help, I don't have any support, I'm in this alone. I knew that I wasn't alone, and that is I see now what a difference it makes when we know we're not in something by ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's something very scary about thinking you're in it alone.
Well, I think this is so applicable to so many different scenarios, right? I think about how many flood victims there are, across the country right now. Mm-hmm. I think about any sort of medical issue. You even talked about the medical issue. And divorce. This can be applicable to so many different scenarios. And how do we support people going through trauma?
Yeah, and just being there for them. And I think that's all we really need to do. And not really giving a lot of advice. This experience taught me not to give advice unless it's asked for. And then even then, to be very careful. Because we're in a very vulnerable place. And it's very easy to take somebody else's advice and then find out later that it was the wrong advice. People mean well, they want to help, and so sometimes they would give advice that I really should have only been getting from an attorney. and so it's like, take legal advice from your attorney, take financial advice from someone who knows things about that, and and everything else, you just kind of have to be selective about who you take advice from. And so that's why I try to be selective about who I give advice to, that when somebody is going through trauma or something very difficult, the best thing I can do is just be there and listen. Mm-hmm. and let them know that I love them, because otherwise it's overwhelming when to get inundated with a lot of advice, and you need to do it this way, and
it has to be harder because there is often conflicting advice.
Yes. People are. The best example I can think of is when I talk about this in the book, that eventually my youngest son and I had to choose to move. Had to choose to I was not going to be, unless I wanted life to be really, really hard for a very long time and live in maybe a small apartment in a bad neighborhood, I needed to move. My parents had been wanting me to move back in with them for a long time. I think they wanted to kidnap me the day that I got the email saying that my husband wanted a divorce. When I decided that I was going to consider moving, I emailed several friends and I asked, would you please pray? I'm considering moving back to the Bay Area where I was raised. And within 5 minutes, I received one email outlining why this would be the best thing for me, and another one outlining with equally as good points. They were good points.
Right.
And I knew, and these were both people I trusted, both people I respected and I really loved and knew cared about me. But this other person told me why it would be a really bad decision. And so that was my moment when one of many moments when I realized how important it is to ultimately we have to take our wisdom from God. Mm-hmm. I had to just pray and say, okay, God, I don't know what to do. What should I do? And I had to ask him to give me clarity, because the advice was coming from both sides, and it was not bad advice. And so it's just a reminder that when people are going through these things, they are so overwhelmed, and if on top of that they feel like they're losing their friends,
right,
then that's it's so heartbreaking, because we're losing so much I lost my house. We had to file bankruptcy. When my younger son and I moved, my oldest decided to stay behind because he had a job and he didn't want to leave, and so there were all these other losses that came with it, and then having the added complication of not being able to drive and being very dependent on people.
Right.
Made things. But at the same time, I got to see God's people at their best, because I don't think I missed out on anything because of a lack of a ride.
That's incredible.
It really was. It was incredible.
And it's not all Uber?
No. I don't think Uber even existed. This was about 6 years ago, and so I learned to take the public transportation system, but I hardly ever had to use it, and I just had this list of people that I could call if I needed anything. And I found that this is one thing I discovered, is that when people really care about you, they don't mind helping. I was so afraid of being a burden on my friends. But instead I found that I actually made new friends because of my need for a rise.
Oh my goodness, so your need brought new community. That's incredible.
Yes, or deepened friendships that were just sort of, people that were acquaintances that we liked each other, but we didn't really spend a lot of time together. We spent this time in the car. We'd go grocery shopping together, and I have some really fond memories of that time of people who took me to really difficult appointments, or would just take me to the store. Some people who really enjoyed taking me to certain stores, like, call me if you're going to Trader Joe's, or because I want to, I need to go too. So, it was I wouldn't say it was a really fun time because life was falling apart other than that, but it made an otherwise really difficult time so much sweeter because I had these relationships that formed, and I was able to see that I wasn't a burden on people, and also I was able to see that that having the limitation of not being able to drive wasn't going to necessarily hold me back from thriving as a single mom. That if God allowed it, He was going to equip me and provide. Mm. And one story that came to mind, and I share this early on in the book, is that there was one day when I remember I was just so overwhelmed, and I literally asked God, "Is this a joke? Really? How is it possible that the person who can't drive, who has had limited vision since birth, who has such a feast or famine income, is expected to survive as a single parent? This really is not funny." and I have this thought about, I remembered one of my favorite Bible stories is about the one about the man who was born blind, who Jesus healed. Mm-hmm. And before Jesus healed him, people were asking, who sinned that this man was born blind? Mm-hmm. And Jesus said, no one sinned. He was born blind so God's glory could be displayed in his life. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if that was what God wanted to do with my situation, that Jesus was able to display God's glory through this man by healing him, but maybe with me, he was going to do it in another way, in that by just accepting this new life as what, I didn't really have an option to not do it. It wasn't like, I don't want to do this. I had to. And so maybe by just embracing it and accepting that this is your life now, I could allow God's goodness to be glorified and to be put on display in some way, that I could somehow show people that this was not a hopeless situation. Because there were a few of my friends who were, of course, just so angry that my husband would leave, but they were all the more angry because they knew it kind of that he was leaving me in such a vulnerable place without transportation, and they said, how could he leave his legally blind wife? And I thought, right. At first I was like, how is that? Why is that sadder? I mean, I've always been legally blind. I've always made it work. Then it was like that day it hit me. Wow, that really was low. Yeah. That I felt the vulnerability of my position, and but then saw that I knew that God was going to take care of me, and that if I persevered, and that not only would I be okay, but that other people would be watching, and that I would be an example of, see, it is possible for for a person to survive in a difficult situation with added challenges. And I think there was also a little bit of a fear that was driving me too, because I had read stories about blind and visually impaired people whose spouses used their disability against them in court.
Oh,
yeah, saying that it was, I mean, awful stories of people who said, well, she's not wouldn't be able to care for
fit
her
mother.
child.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
Yes, and, and so I was so afraid of that I thought, I'll show them. He's not going to be able to. It's going to be very obvious that I'm doing just fine.
Oh my goodness.
So there was a determination there to prove that I could do this. That if I cannot afford to I don't say wallow, but to shrivel up and give in to the fear and the what's going on in my mind right now. I have to just suck it up and do this. And but then there were times, I learned also that persevering and doing what we have to do does not mean pretending it isn't hard.
Right. You talk about wallow days, right? What is
yes.
that? What are those days for you? And what was that like?
For me, those were days when I had to give myself permission to just be in a really sad place. I mean, there's one day that I write about where when I couldn't focus on my work. I was really teary. I just couldn't. I didn't feel like I was going to get anything done that day. I had heard about women saying when I went through a divorce, I just didn't want to get out of bed. And I had never had that option because I had kids to take care of and I had work to do. And I was kind of glad I didn't have that option. But that day, I wanted to have that option. It's like, that sounds like something I'd really like to do right now is just crawl into the covers and cry all day. And I asked a few friends to pray, and one of my friends emailed me back almost immediately and said, you're entitled to a wallow day every once in a while.
Mm.
And this is very difficult. This is exhausting, and sometimes you just need to be sad. And so for me, a wallow day wasn't necessarily always the whole day. Sometimes it was just until lunchtime, I'm just going to let myself be sad. Just kind of letting myself drag around a little bit, not pretending that I was doing okay, to give in to the emotion, to spend time with God, to just to let myself feel what I was feeling.
Well, I think that's part of the grief and lamenting process, right? I mean,
yes.
We have to actually let ourselves go there in order to heal.
Yeah. And it reminded me that sometimes it is easier to stay in survival mode and to not feel those things. But when we allow ourselves to feel it for a little while, whether it's for a day or an hour, then we have the strength to do what we need to do later. Then we have the strength to do our work. We have the focus comes back. That's what I found, that when I stopped fighting it, then my energy and my focus and my strength returned after I had poured all of that out.
Yeah, so good. I think that's good for, again, anybody in any sort of situation, is that we have to allow ourselves to put our defenses down and to really dig into those emotions and the grief and let God, take it to God, really, and let Him take that and speak to you, in that you have to let that out.
Yeah, and I think also it teaches us that admitting that something's hard does not mean that we're weak. I thought that because I had people who were so encouraging that would say, "Oh, you're handling this so well. You look amazing. You're a reflection of God's grace." And it was always so encouraging to me and so helpful. But then when I started feeling sad or angry or overwhelmed, I thought, I'm not being an example of God's grace anymore.
Oh, yeah.
And I learned through this, that being an example of God's grace does not mean that we don't grieve. And sometimes being able to show our grief and be honest and admit to people, I'm actually really not doing very well today, is an example of God's grace.
Absolutely, because the thing is, God doesn't promise that we're not going to go through troubles. He promised that He's going to be there. So it's not good just to pretend that there's nothing bad in our lives, and it's not hard. I mean, He wants to comfort us, and He wants to be with us through these difficult times. So, I mean, that absolutely is the definition that, of being a Christian, and His grace is that He is there. That is grace, that He's there in the hard times. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that we become so much more relatable when we are honest, and when we are able to say, this is really hard, or I am so overwhelmed, or well, you should have seen me yesterday. And or when we ask for help, when my situation forced me to ask for help. I didn't have any option but to learn how to ask for help from people. And that something about being my survival depending on my willingness to ask for help. I don't think I realized how much pride I had until I had to set it aside and not only ask for practical help, but also emotional support and all the things that go along with being divorced and raising your kids alone. And, we don't go into parenting expecting to raise our kids by ourselves.
Right. So I do want to talk about that a bit, for single moms that might be listening. What advice could you give to maybe single moms that are out there? Maybe obviously it sounds like we need to have some wallow days. We need to find some community. We need to ask for help. Is there anything else that you would communicate to them in this season?
I would definitely advise moms to take care of themselves. I mean, not take care of yourself. Put yourself. I'm not saying put yourself first.
There's a self-care, right?
Yes, definitely. I used to think that when people talked about, for a long time, when people talked about self-care, I was in my own head, I was rolling my eyes. But, oh my gosh, that is so, like, get over it. It seemed selfish to me. And I thought, no, all it is taking care of yourself. And I've learned how important it is. Whatever that is, it just is making sure that you're physically healthy, you're doing what you need to do to be physically healthy, emotionally healthy, to be willing to go through the healing process, and also understanding that can take a while. I'm even learning recently how long the healing process takes, and that sometimes it gets put on hold for a while, then you have to come back, and then put it on hold again, and then come back, and I've done that over the course of the 6 years since my husband left, but to be willing to go through that, whatever you need to do, whether it's going to counseling or going to divorce care or whatever, so make use of every resource that your church or your community has, because you really do need it. And we don't need all of it. We don't always need all of it all at once, but when you need something, reach out and find a community or somebody that can help you, because we really do need support. We're pouring so much energy into our kids and working more to earn more income and just and then dealing with whatever it is that made you a single mom, whether it's a divorce or a death or we all have our own stories, but they usually involve something painful, and so we need to deal with the traumatic event or events that led up to us being where we are, and even just the having the person who said they were going to love you forever just suddenly leave, really, I mean, I found that it impacted my friendships, my, I had such a hard time trusting people and trusting myself that I finally just had to work on that. I had to go and find somebody that could help me sort through all of that, because I started getting tired of my own reactions, and I knew where it was coming from, but I couldn't stop it. And so finding support and finding help is so important, because then you'll be a better parent. You'll be a better, the more I've been willing to address my own pain and get the help I needed and the support I needed, I found that I had more to give to.
Well, I think there's got to be so much hesitation, because one, why would I spend like money if there's, counseling involved? Why would I spend my time away from my kids? I already have limited time, and you think you're taking away, but really you're investing in yourself, which will overflow more into your kids.
Yes.
It's an investment in your kids. It ultimately.
And if we are, and even our physical health, that if we are physically unhealthy, we can't take care of anybody.
Right. I am totally going through that now. I have been dealing with chronic fatigue, and oh my goodness, just, I have to take care of my exercise. I have to exercise and take care of my nutrition, because I can't take care of my family, if I'm not well. I mean,
right. Yeah, everything goes down the tubes if mom's not well. And depression, I had struggled with, I had a history of depression when my husband left. But miraculously, God allowed me to get through the entire divorce and move without sinking back into that. I think that I knew I just did not have the option. I had to someone asked me, do you really think it's possible to will yourself out of depression? I said, this time it was, but I think it was God. Because later, when life calmed down and I didn't have so much on my plate because I had moved and was living at my parents' house, that's when things started catching up with me. And I knew that because I had a history of really sinking into the pit, I didn't want to. And so whenever I felt myself going down that road, I would say, okay, what do I need to do? But I know that there were times when I was depressed, but was just trying to pretend I wasn't. No, I don't do that anymore. That's the old me. But, how can we go through these things and not get depressed? I know I was probably walking around in a fog for years. And then when I finally started coming out of it, because I finally dealt with all of that, then I recognized, wow, I think I was depressed. I just tried to pretend like I wasn't. I just couldn't afford to feel that.
Right. So let me ask you about this. Clearly this experience of being a single mom and going through the divorce, it really put you out of your comfort zone. God really put you in a place that you were not in your comfort zone. How do you think that's prepared you for other areas where God has asked you out of your comfort zone? Have you seen any impacts?
Yes. Yeah. Because I had to, I was really thrown out of my comfort zone when my husband left. And so I had to, learn the public transportation system and reach out for help and make phone calls that I never thought I would make, and call bill collectors and talk to attorneys and do all these things that were so scary for me, that now I feel like I am I think a lot more bold. I used to be, I still struggle with this, but I can be extremely passive. And really held back by fear. Mm-hmm. And this threw me into a situation where I could not afford to give into that fear. I had to just call the bill collector I knew was going to be mad at me and explain for the 10th time why, no, I can't pay the mortgage. And so it has equipped me to, I think, even say difficult things when they need to be said, and Yeah, that's actually an area that still scares me to death. But I can at least do it more than, not quite as passive as I used to be in that area. And being willing to take steps even when I know they're going to be hard. I think that being thrown out of my comfort zone taught me that I no longer expect life to be easy.
Mm.
And I no longer expect life to be a comfort zone.
And you can handle it. And you can handle it, and that God will be with you.
Yeah,
and that He will equip you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That He's going to equip us for what life has handed us. And so I think it's maybe less afraid.
Mm. Well, that is one good thing that's come out of it then.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah, and I no longer buy into the messages that because I have certain limitations, I can't do certain things.
Mm.
And, that I participated in a new activity recently, and I could tell that the director was a little hesitant about my ability to handle what I was doing because of my limited vision. And I said, I'm not worried. It's going to be fine. And initially there was this feeling, oh no, I have to prove myself capable of doing this. But the thing is that I didn't doubt myself. And that was a big step for me, was to say, I can do this. She has no idea what I've handled.
Right.
Already.
You just don't know.
Let's go to lunch. I'll tell you my story.
Yeah.
So we underestimate ourselves, like, sometimes, I think.
Absolutely, all the time. All the time. Well, I just appreciate you so much sharing that. I know that's such a personal journey that you've been through. But I'm so inspired by your determination and your perseverance and all you've learned. So thank you for sharing that today.
Thank you.
If people want to connect with you, pick up the book, where's the best place that they can do that at?
Well, Suddenly Single Mom can be found on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, ChristianBook.com, wherever you find books. And you can connect with me on my website, and I blog every week and just kind of write about what God is teaching me through everyday experiences, and also on Facebook. I don't do a lot on Twitter. I always put my blog posts out on Twitter, but I find Twitter visually overwhelming. And so I'm more a Facebook person. And so, yeah, Facebook and my blog.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again so much for spending time with me today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yep. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Jeanette. There were so many good nuggets in there, whether you were a single mom or not. We mentioned it a few times, but I think this really can relate to any tough situation that God has asked us to walk through. A few things stick out to me that I wanted to share. The first is community. I mean, if you listen to this show a lot, you know that the topic of community comes up so many times, and how crucial community is, especially when you're traveling through a difficult time, and how much it means. So I think for some of us that are traveling through a dark season, I think we can reach out to your church, or maybe even just one or two friends that you can really be honest with and transparent with, and that can help you shoulder some of the emotions and really some of the added responsibilities that you might have in the season that you're in. And for those of us that are just seeing someone close to us go through something difficult, that we might just volunteer ourselves in whatever capacity we can to help lighten the load. It's just community. We are built for community, and community will help us on both ends. And the thing that was super encouraging to me is that as God allows these circumstances to come into our lives, He does two things. First, He comforts us. I loved how she talks about her wallow days, and how sometimes you really do just have to let yourself feel the feelings and wade through them. There's really no way around them. We just got to go through them and feel them and process those. I have heard over and over from the women on this podcast who have traveled through dark times that you really have to open yourself up to God and really let yourself grieve through the difficult times. But it's not just that God comforts us in these situations, but that He equips us and gives us what we need to travel the road. But even better than that, when we do travel through hard times, it not only equips us for the time that we're in now, but it equips us even more for the next journey he has for us, because she talked about traveling through this and building up this, ability to come over her fear, and how it's helped in other situations for her not to be so fearful. When we allow God to help us, he will not waste any of our hardship. He promises he will work it out for our good. All right, guys, that's going to wrap us up for this week. So thankful for Jeanette and her story. I hope it encouraged you. I want to send another reminder out to you guys to follow us over on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram as Abiding Ministries. You can also sign up for our email list. We send an email out every week to give you a heads up about the episode, and you can go to abidingministries.net/blog. And the sign up is right on the sidebar. You can actually get a sample of our Bible study rich when you do that. So you should do that if you haven't already. All right, guys, I think that is it for this week. I appreciate you guys so much for listening, and we will see you next week on Feathers.